Ahoy! As of today, we know what the next weapon is for sure. We also have more information about it. Now, we don't have confirmation from Amazon Games, but they accidentally gave us confirmation anyways. So this was posted by Reddit user awkwardshift8239, who found something very interesting, not in the game files, where we had previously had a lot of information about the Flail already, but rather in the attribute perks. How is that possible? Well, if we look at the description of strength as an attribute, we see that currently in the English version we've got the Warhammer, the Great Axe, the Sword, Hatchet, Blunderbuss, Spear and the Greatsword listed there. And under focus scaling we have the Life Staff and the Void Gauntlet listed. That is as it should be. However, in other languages there is a little addition here. In the French version we have a mention of le Flail, the Flail. The same weapon is then once again mentioned under concentration, which is focus. And this is not just an oversight in the French version, it is also present in the Spanish version. Here we actually learn a little bit more about the specific type of flail, because people were wondering if it's more like the flail that is like a two-part stick essentially, or more like a morning star. And here we have the mention of manguales. And the mangual would be the type of flail with a chain and the morning star at the end. But there's some other information inside of this that may be somewhat surprising. The primary attribute for the flail will be strength, and the secondary attribute will be focus. So this is not a purely focused weapon, but rather it has a strength component and the focus is a utility component to some degree. Now it is worth keeping in mind that you can slot a focus gem in this if you're using this with a life staff, and then the focus scaling will be fairly high. That's like slotting an int gem in a rapier, for example. But it is interesting because they said that the weapon would be focused on healing, buffing and supporting, so I was expecting a primary focus scaling. I am not opposed to this at all though, because this makes the weapon more flexible. You can go for a more damage focused route with a strength build, or a more utility focused route, a healing focused route with a focus build, whereas the other way around you can't push a weapon into more strength because there's no strength gem. This is especially interesting in context of the other information from the previous data mining that we already have about the flail as well. I talked about this in detail, and one of the aspects of that is that the flail will be able to be used with a shield. So if this information is still correct, which I think is likely, I don't think they would change that last minute, then there are some really interesting build combinations going on here. You can very much do the full Paladin dream. You can do the SNS plus Flail, both strength scaling to some degree and both with a shield, or you can pair it with a hammer or any other melee weapon really, and that's just going to be extremely cool, extremely interesting, and hopefully something that will also have a major impact on the PvP meta. What I'm once again wondering about, especially with this lower focus value, is how much healing this weapon will really have, because the Void Gauntlet, for example, has some nice extra healing, but it's not really a healing focused weapon as such, and some of the healing is also more indirect, so for example applying Essence Rupture to the enemy, which makes your allies heal for their own damage. So it could be something in that direction when it comes to how exactly this weapon works. I would imagine that there's maybe a decent component of passive healing or AoE healing just around you, and you just have to be in the middle of a clump like a true Paladin. And the question in that context becomes, of course, how effective it will be in a full healer build. The Void Gauntlet works quite well with that. You can put a Void Gauntlet in a full healer build, especially in PvE. In PvP you can do that too for more healing, but it is also more risky because you're giving up a lot of safety. I would imagine that, especially due to the shield, the Flail might be a little bit safer than the Void Gauntlet in that regard. Now, if the Flail doesn't have a lot of direct healing, then I would feel like a lot of people would be leaning more towards a full strength build anyways, because if there isn't a lot of direct healing, then there isn't really much of a reason to spec into focus, because you're not going to increase a lot of healing, unless they have other ways to encourage using focus. It's also going to be interesting if there's going to be some overlapping viability between the Flail and the Void Gauntlet, both having minor focus scaling. Obviously, that's not the first choice that comes to mind. You would think of Life Staff or a strength weapon, but maybe you can do some combination of buffing, shielding, and then simultaneously debuffing with the Void Gauntlet as well. Though, depending on how exactly the Flail works, that may be more or less engaging, so I'm not sure if that's going to become a thing. Of course, it's also going to be interesting to see how much damage output the Flail has, because initially the Life Staff had the problem of being very good in terms of self-healing, but also actually dealing a lot of damage, and that had to be tuned down a fair bit over time. If you enjoyed the video so far, shifting these bars just a tiny bit would help me a lot. Also, I will link my previous data mining video about the Flail right here if you're interested in details about that. But there were also some changes over the last days that I quickly wanted to talk about. One of the things that happened is that there was a change to the Haddish Hazard encounter in the hatchery, which now has the explosive sulfur core phase. I've tested that. Honestly, it makes no difference to the fight. It's still very, very easy. But again, I think it's good that there is an easy raid for people to just get used to raids in general, and then there's the hard one for the ones that want to go hard. In the same breath, they also made some changes to the solo version of Haddish Hazard, so you don't get pulled in the last phase while he's doing all his special effects and his flame walls. But interesting enough, they didn't do that for the group version, so if you get sucked in at the wrong time, you can still follow the edge. I guess it's intended at this point because they're specifically not changing it, so you actually have to position properly. Or, dodge well. The Enraged Devourer drone is also fixed if you were stuck on that questline. And there were a variety of changes to achievements that didn't work. They said that they're actually just fixing them according to the description that they made, but that's not quite what happened. So, for example, the Hasty Hatcher, which required you to clear the hatchery in 10 minutes, is now actually clear the hatchery 10 times. And likewise, the Flawless Sandworm kill, which was bugged, so we didn't even get the title for doing it as the first group in the world, was also changed, which is very unfortunate, because I really liked the challenge of that one, and that's gone now, so that is going to be clear the Sandworm raid 3 times. Obviously, in terms of bragging rights, I'm sad, but also I'm happy that people will be able to get this challenge a little bit easier, because I think by the end of the season, a lot of groups will be able to clear this raid. We just had another group on our server clear today, NA has cleared by now, so I think the ball is kind of getting rolling, people are figuring it out, and there will be a guide on my channel about this probably tomorrow, if you want to know in detail how you can get through the raid. If you were a healer, you were probably aware of the targeted healing issues. That one should also hopefully be fixed now. And you're now able to switch gear sets properly in 3v3 Arena. If you're trying to access your old first light storage, that's now also always shown, so that one is no longer a problem either. There is still one big problem with the patch without any fixes so far, and that's the performance issues that the patch introduced. Now there's a problem with that, and that's that these are very inconsistent issues. Performance issues are obviously always hard to pinpoint, but in this particular case, the performance issues are not the same for everyone. I am one of the people who is very heavily feeling them, having issues especially in larger groups and raids, even with weapon swapping and stuff. But other people have actually seen improvements in performance with this patch. So this is extremely weird. Super Omega, who usually wasn't able to record his stuff, was easily able to record, and the Samuel was saying his game was running absolutely fine. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening there. I thought initially that this may be something related to the UI somehow, but I guess that's not it. And as such, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a very difficult one to figure out. I hope they find a solution to this sooner rather than later, because I really want a PvP and also some OPR on the new patch, and my PC already ran poorly in OPR beforehand, so I don't even want to know what it would be like now before this is fixed. In the next days we have the Sandworm guide and also a very nice way to farm cheap Sandworm gear, so if you're interested in that, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you get notified. If you'd like to support me further and get early trading tips, you can do so on Patreon. Thanks to all my patrons who already do exactly that. Thanks for watching. Duke Sloth, out.